Enthusiasm. You are listening to The Competitor's Brain. This is Lauren Fox. This is episode number 39. And one thing that we all struggle with to some degree is enthusiasm. And this next part I'm going to steal from Brian Kane and Dr. Rob Gilbert, who have both turned me onto it. And now you're going to get a piece of it as well. So this comes from a book called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling by a gentleman named Frank Bettger. And Frank Bettger played baseball in the major leagues right around the turn of the 20th century, like 1907 to 1910. He was in the majors for a little bit there, but he was struggling in his baseball career. And so he was kind of at a crossroads. So I'm going to read it directly from the book. And chapter 1, How One Idea Multiplied My Income and Happiness. Shortly after I started out as a professional baseball player, I got one of the biggest shocks of my life. That was back in 1907. I was playing for Johnstown, Pennsylvania in the Tri-State League. I was young and ambitious, wanted to get to the top, and what happened? I was fired. My whole life might have been different if I hadn't gone to the manager and asked him why he fired me. In fact, I wouldn't have had the rare privilege of writing this book if I hadn't asked him that question. The manager said he fired me because I was lazy. Well, that was the last thing I expected him to say. You drag yourself around the field like a veteran who's been playing ball for 20 years, he told me. Why do you act that way if you're not lazy? Well, Bert, I said, I'm so nervous, so scared that I want to hide my fear from the crowd and especially from the other players on the team. Besides, I hope that by taking it easy, I'll get rid of my nervousness. Frank, he said, it'll never work. That's the thing that is holding you down. Whatever you do after you leave here, for heaven's sake, wake yourself up and put some life and enthusiasm into your work. I'd been making $175 a month at Johnstown. After being fired there, I went down to Chester, Pennsylvania in the Atlantic League where they paid me only $25 a month. Well, I couldn't feel very enthusiastic on that kind of money, so I began to act enthusiastic. After I was there 3 days, an old ball player, Danny Meehan, came to me and said, Frank, what in the world are you doing down here in a rank bush league like this? Well, Danny, I replied, if I knew how to get to a better job, I'd go anywhere. A week later, Danny introduced New Haven, Connecticut to give me a trial. Induced New Haven, Connecticut to give me a trial. My first day in New Haven will always stand out in my memory as a great event in my life. No one knew me in that league, so I made a resolution that nobody would ever accuse me of being lazy. I made up my mind to establish a reputation of being the most enthusiastic ball player they had ever seen in the New England League. I thought if I could establish such a reputation, then I'd have to live up to it. From the minute I appeared on the field, I acted like a man electrified. I acted as though I were alive with a million batteries. I threw the ball around the diamond so fast and so hard that it almost knocked our infielders' hands apart. Once apparently trapped, I slid into third base with so much energy and force that the third baseman fumbled the ball and I was able to score an important run. Yes, it was all a show, an act I was putting on. The thermometer that day was nearly 100 degrees. I wouldn't have been surprised if I had dropped over a sunstroke the way I ran around the field. Did it work? It worked like magic. These things happened. 1, my enthusiasm almost entirely overcame my fear. In fact, my nervousness began to work for me, and I played far better than I ever thought I was capable of playing. If you're nervous, be thankful. Don't hold it back. Turn it on. Let your nerves work for you. Number 2, my enthusiasm affected the other players on the team, and they too became enthusiastic. Number 3, instead of dropping with the heat, I felt better during the game and after it was over than I had felt before the game. My biggest thrill came the following morning when I read in the New Haven newspaper. This new player, Bettger, has a barrel of enthusiasm. He inspired our boys. They not only won the game, but looked better than at any time this season. The newspapers began calling me Pep Bettger, the life of the team. I mailed the newspaper clippings to Bert Kahn, the manager of Johnstown. Can you imagine the expression on his face as he read about Pep Bettger, the dub he tied a can to 3 weeks before for being lazy? Within 10 days, enthusiasm took me from $25 a month to $185 a month. Increased my income by 700%. Let me repeat, nothing but the determination to act enthusiastic increased my income 700% in 10 days. I got this stupendous increase in salary, not because I could throw a ball better or catch a hit better, not because I had any more ability as a ball player. I didn't know any more about baseball than I did before. 2 years later, 2 years from the time I'd been hoping to get $25 a month in that little Chester outfit, I was playing third base for the St. Louis Cardinals and multiplied my income by 30 times. What did it? Enthusiasm alone did it. Nothing but enthusiasm. 2 years after that, while playing a game in Chicago against the Chicago Cubs, I had a bad accident. Picking up a swinging bunt while on a full run, I attempted to throw in the opposite direction. Something snapped in my arm. That accident forced me to give up baseball. This seemed like a great tragedy to me at the time, but I now look back at it as one of the most fortunate events of my life. I returned home and for the next 2 years made my living right around the streets of Philadelphia on a bicycle. I was a collector for an installment furniture concern, $1 down and the balance in uneasy weekly payments. After 2 dismal years of collecting installments, I decided to try selling insurance with Fidelity Mutual Life Insurance Company. The next 10 months were the longest and most disheartening months of my life. A dismal failure at selling life insurance, I finally concluded that I was never cut out to be a salesman and began answering want ads for a job as a shipping clerk. I realized, however, that no matter what work I decided to do, or tried to do, I had to overcome a strange fear complex that possessed me. So I joined one of Mr. Dale Carnegie's courses in public speaking. One night, he stopped me in the middle of a talk. "Mr. Bettger," he said, just a moment. "Are you interested in what you're saying?" "Yes, of course I am," I replied. "Well then," said Mr. Carnegie, "why don't you talk with a little enthusiasm? How do you expect your audience to be interested if you don't put some life and animation into what you say?" Dale Carnegie then gave our class a stirring talk on the power of enthusiasm. He got so excited during his talk, he threw a chair up against the wall and broke off one of its legs. Before I went to bed that night, I sat for an hour thinking. My thoughts went back to my baseball days at Johnstown and New Haven. For the first time, I realized that the very fault which had threatened to wreck my career as a baseball player was now threatening to wreck my career as a salesman. The decision I made that night was the turning point of my life. That decision was to stay in the insurance business, put the same enthusiasm into selling that I had put into playing baseball when I joined the New Haven team. I shall never forget the first call I made the day. It was my first crashing through session. I made up my mind that I was going to show my prospect the most enthusiastic salesman he had ever seen in his life. As I pounded my fist with excitement, I expected any minute to have the man stop me and ask if there was something wrong with me. But he didn't. At one stage of the interview, I noticed he raised himself to a more erect position and opened his eyes wider, but he never stopped me, except to ask questions. Did he throw me out? No, he bought. This man, Al Emmons, a grain merchant in the Bourse Building, Philadelphia, soon became one of my good friends and best boosters. From that day on, I began to sell. The magic of enthusiasm began to work for me in business, just as it had in baseball. I would not want to give anybody the impression that I think enthusiasm consists of fist pounding, but if fist pounding is what you need to arouse yourself inside, then I am overwhelmingly for it. I know this. When I force myself to act enthusiastic, I soon feel enthusiastic. During my 32 years of selling, I have seen enthusiasm double and triple the income of dozens of salesmen, and I have seen the lack of it cause hundreds of salesmen to fail. I firmly believe enthusiasm is by far the biggest single factor in successful selling. For example, I know a man who is an authority on insurance. He could even write a book on the subject, and yet he can't make a decent living selling it. Why? Largely because of his lack of enthusiasm. I know another salesman who didn't know 1/10 as much about insurance, yet he made a fortune selling it and retired in 20 years. His name is Stanley Geddes. He now lives in Miami Beach, Florida. The reason for his outstanding secret success was not knowledge. It was enthusiasm. Can you acquire enthusiasm or must you be born with it? Certainly you can acquire it. Stanley Geddes acquired it. He became a human dynamo. How? Just by forcing himself every day to act enthusiastic. As part of his plan, Stanley Geddes repeated a poem almost every morning for 20 years. He found that repeating it helped him generate enthusiasm for the day. I found this poem so inspiring that I had it printed on a card and gave away hundreds of them. It was written by Herbert Kaufman and has a good title, Victory. You are the man who used to boast that you'd achieve the uttermost someday. You merely wish to show, to demonstrate how much you know and prove the distance you can go. Another year we've just passed through. What new ideas came to you? How many big things did you do? Time left 12 fresh months in your care. How many of them did you share with opportunity and dare, again, where you so often miss? We do not find you on the list of makers good. Explain that fact. Ah, no, 'twas not the chance you lacked. As usual, you failed to act. Why don't you memorize this poem and repeat it daily? It may do for you what it did for Stanley Geddes. Once I read a statement made by Walter P. Chrysler. I was so impressed by it, I carried it in my pocket for a week. I'll bet I read it over 40 times. I knew it by heart. I wish every salesman would memorize it. Walter Chrysler, when asked to give the secret of success, listed the various qualities such as ability, capacity, energy, but added that the real secret was enthusiasm. Yes, more than enthusiasm, said Chrysler. I would say excitement. I like to see men get excited. When they get excited, they get customers excited, and we get business. Enthusiasm is by far the highest paid quality on earth, possibly because it is one of the rarest, yet it is one of the most contagious. If you are enthusiastic, your listener is very likely to become enthusiastic, even though you may present your ideas poorly. Without enthusiasm, your sales talk is about as dead as last year's turkey. Enthusiasm isn't merely an outward expression. Once you begin to acquire it, enthusiasm works constantly within you. You may be sitting quietly in your home, an idea occurs to you, that idea begins to develop. Finally, you become consumed with enthusiasm. Nothing can stop you. It will help you overcome fear, become more successful in business, make more money, enjoy a healthier, richer, and happier life. When can you begin? Right now. Just say to yourself, this is one thing I can do. How can you begin? There's just one rule. To become enthusiastic, act enthusiastic. Put this rule into action for 30 days and be prepared to see astonishing results. It may easily revolutionize your entire life. Stand up on your hind legs each morning and repeat with powerful gestures and all the enthusiasm you can generate these words. Force yourself to act enthusiastic and you will become enthusiastic.